The red alert siren wailed through the command center. Captain James Walker gripped the edge of the viewing table, his knuckles white, as he stared at the holographic display. Dozens of unknown vessels had just appeared near Mars, seemingly out of nowhere. "What are we looking at?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. Lieutenant Davis looked up from her station, her face pale. "Sir, we count 37 ships. Largest is about 3 kilometers long. Nothing like this in our databases." Walker nodded and straightened his uniform. After 15 years in Earth's Defense Force, he had trained for this moment. First contact, but not like this, not with an armada. "Open all channels," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a being that looked almost human, except for the blue-tinted skin and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. The alien wore what appeared to be some kind of military uniform. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in perfect English, which was unsettling enough. "I am Commander Vex of the Aldari Expansion Fleet. Your world has resources we require. You will surrender them and accept our authority, or we will take them by force. You have 24 hours to decide." The screen went dark before Walker could respond. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings. Leaders from every nation argued while military advisors presented options. None looked good. Earth's combined space fleet consisted of 12 battle cruisers and 30 smaller vessels, all untested in actual combat. "We can't just give up," Walker said, standing before the emergency council. "We need to show them we can fight." President Lee nodded slowly. "Captain Walker, you commanded our forces in the Pacific conflict. You know war better than anyone in this room. Can we win this?" Walker wanted to lie, to say yes, but couldn't. "I don't know. But I know we must try." His orders came through an hour later. Walker would lead Earth's main battle group to Mars orbit as a show of force. Maybe the aliens would back down. Nobody really believed it. As Walker boarded his flagship, the EDF Defender, he touched the photo of his daughter tucked inside his pocket. 10 years old, smiling on her birthday. This was why he fought. The Earth fleet moved into position. 12 large ships and their escorts arranged in battle formation. Walker felt a strange sense of calm as he gave the orders to power up weapon systems. "All ships report ready, sir," Davis said from her new position as his second in command. "Very well. Target the lead Aldari vessel. Warning shot only." Walker never finished his command. Every console on the bridge suddenly went dark. The ship's engines died. Around them, the entire human fleet drifted powerless. "Emergency systems," Walker shouted, but nothing happened. Through the viewport, he could see the other Earth ships, all dead in space. But strangely, the Aldari vessels seemed unaffected. The communication system crackled back to life on its own. Commander Vex's face appeared again, now wearing what looked like a smile. "Captain Walker, did you really think it would be so simple? Your weapons cannot function in deep space. None can. It is the law that binds all advanced races, a law you clearly don't understand." Walker stared at the screen in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Space itself forbids war among the stars. The universe has safeguards, but these protections only work when both sides possess certain technologies. You activated the prohibition when you developed your first faster-than-light drive last year." Vex's smile widened. "But the prohibition doesn't extend to planetary surfaces, which is why we will now begin landing our troops. We'll see you on the ground, Captain." The screen went dark as Walker realized with horror what this meant. Earth couldn't fight in space. Their only defense had just been rendered useless by some cosmic rule they'd never known existed. The invasion had begun. Walker sat in the darkened command room of the disabled Defender. Emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow. 3 hours had passed since their systems failed, and engineers could find no cause. It was as if the laws of physics had simply changed. "Sir," Davis called from a makeshift communication station they'd rigged with backup power. "We're picking up a transmission, but it's not from the Aldari fleet." Walker frowned. Put it through. The screen showed a slender figure with pale gray skin and large, almost insect-like eyes. Unlike Commander Vex, this alien seemed nervous. Captain Walker, I am Cell of the Mithran Science Guild. I don't have much time. The Aldari don't know I'm contacting you. Walker leaned forward. Why are you helping us? Because the Aldari are breaking the spirit of the law while following its letter. What they're doing is wrong. Cell glanced over his shoulder. Listen carefully. I'm sending my ship's coordinates. I need to speak with you in person. It's not safe to say more now. Walker looked at Davis. Can we get a shuttle working? She nodded. The smaller systems seem unaffected. Only the weapons and main drives are dead. 2 hours later, Walker's shuttle approached a small vessel hidden in the shadow of Mars' moon Phobos. It was sleek and organic-looking, nothing like the angular Aldari ships. Cell met him in a simple room with a single table. The alien was taller than he looked on screen, nearly 7 feet, but moved with a fragile grace. Thank you for coming, Cell said. What I'm about to tell you violates several Galactic Council directives. I'm listening, Walker said. There is an ancient treaty, the Spatial Combat Prohibition. But it's not just words on paper. It's enforced by technology so advanced it seems like magic. Cell touched a device on his wrist, projecting a hologram of the solar system. Millions of years ago, 2 advanced civilizations fought a war that nearly tore apart the fabric of space-time itself. The surviving species created a network that spans the galaxy, microscopic machines that disable weapons when they detect the intent for space warfare. Walker's mind raced. But the Aldari ships work fine. They're not using weapon systems. They're using mining equipment and terraforming tools that happen to be destructive. The prohibition is literal in its programming. It doesn't understand context, only capability. And this only works in space. Cell nodded. The technology can't function within a planetary gravity well. That's why the Aldari want to fight on Earth's surface, where they have the advantage. Walker paced the small room. How do they know so much about us? They spoke perfect English. They've been monitoring your broadcasts for decades. Your planet leaks information everywhere. Cell hesitated. There's something else. The Galactic Council denied Earth protection because they're afraid of humans. Walker stopped. Afraid? Of us? Why? Your adaptability. Your creativity with violence. Most species evolved past warfare before reaching space. Humans developed faster than light travel while still fighting among yourselves. That's unprecedented. So what do? We can't fight in space, and we can't win on the ground. Zell projected a new image, strange symbols and diagrams. These are from my research on the Prohibition technology. There might be a way to, not exactly bypass it, but work within its rules. No species has ever tried because no species thinks the way humans do. Walker studied the alien's face. Why help us? The Aldari conquered my homeworld 50 years ago. They exploit loopholes and technicalities to expand their empire while the Council debates and does nothing. Cell's large eyes blinked slowly. Perhaps humans, with their unique perspective, can show the galaxy another way. A sudden alarm blared from Cell's console. Aldari patrols. You must go. Now. As Walker rushed back to his shuttle, Cell pressed a small device into his hand. Data on the Prohibition technology. Find Dr. Emma Richards on your planet. She's been experimenting with quantum fields that might interact with the Prohibition network. Walker nodded, realizing that Earth's fate might rest on understanding an ancient law that no human had ever known existed, until now. The Lunar Research Facility was built into the edge of Tycho Crater, its domed windows reflecting Earth's blue glow. Walker stepped out of the shuttle, the data device from Cell heavy in his pocket. He'd come straight to the moon after returning from Mars, bypassing all normal protocols. There wasn't time for red tape. Dr. Emma Richards met him at the airlock. She was shorter than he expected, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Captain Walker, she said, not offering her hand. My research is classified. How did you even know I was here? Walker held up Cell's device. An alien told me to find you. Said you're working on something that might save Earth. Richards raised an eyebrow. That's not what I expected to hear today. In her lab, Walker explained everything. The Aldari, the prohibition field, Cell's warning. Richards listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. So this alien thinks my quantum entanglement experiments might interact with this prohibition technology? She finally asked. That's what he said. Does that make sense to you? Richards paced the lab. Maybe. For the past year, we've been experiencing anomalies in our tests. Random energy fluctuations interfering with our results. We could never identify the source. She stopped suddenly. What if it wasn't interference? What if we were detecting this prohibition network? Walker felt a spark of hope. Could you use it somehow? Find a way around the prohibition? Not with what I know now, Richards said. She held out her hand for Excel's device. But let's see what your alien friend has given us. The device projected complex data patterns that Richards studied intently. Hours passed as she worked, occasionally muttering to herself. Captain, she said finally, I need to show you something. She led Walker through a reinforced door into a massive chamber. Inside stood a half-excavated structure, dark metal covered with intricate symbols. What is this? Walker asked, though something in him already knew. We found it 6 months ago while expanding the facility. It's artificial and predates human civilization by at least 1 million years. Richards touched the surface gently. The symbols match what's on your alien's device. Walker stared at the ancient artifact. Are you saying whoever built the prohibition technology visited Earth's moon? Left this behind? Richards pointed to sections they had uncovered. We think it's a monitoring station. Part of the network your friend Cell mentioned. Walker ran his hand over the cool metal surface. Can we use it? Maybe. Richards gestured to equipment surrounding the artifact. My team has been trying to understand it since we found it. We thought it was simply an alien artifact. Now I realize it's been reacting to our experiments. She brought up data on a nearby screen. Every time we run our quantum tests, the artifact activates slightly. And look at this. She pointed to readings from the day before. When the Aldari arrived and your fleet's weapons failed, energy surged through this structure. Walker felt a chill. It's watching us. Not exactly. It's enforcing the prohibition, like an automated system. Richard studied the new data from Cell. According to this, the prohibition doesn't stop all weapons, just those that could damage space-time. The system analyzes weapon signatures and disables dangerous ones. But how does that help us? The Aldari are landing troops as we speak. Richard smiled for the first time. Because humans have been developing something unique, weapons that harvest quantum energy rather than creating destructive force. My team created prototypes to collect energy for our lunar colony. She paused. The prohibition might not recognize them as weapons at all. Walker's mind raced with possibilities. Could we modify them? Make them effective against the Aldari? Theoretically, but we'd need to understand exactly how the prohibition identifies weapons. Richards looked back at the artifact. And to do that, we need to wake this thing up properly. She turned to Walker, determination in her eyes. We've been poking at it blindly for months. Now we know what it is, and with your alien's data, we might be able to communicate with it. Walker stared at the ancient machine. Their last hope might lie in technology built by beings who had vanished long before humans walked the Earth. But time was running out. The first Aldari ships had already entered Earth's atmosphere. 3 days later, Earth officially surrendered to the Aldari. Walker watched the broadcast from the secure underground bunker beneath the lunar facility, his fists clenched at his sides. We cannot stand against their technological superiority, the president announced, his face grim. To save lives, we accept their terms of occupation. The transmission cut to Commander Vex, who looked smugly into the camera. A wise decision. Our forces will establish control zones, starting with your least populated regions. Cooperate, and your people will be treated fairly. When the screen went dark, Walker turned to Richards. Tell me you have something. She nodded, leading him deeper into the facility where her team worked frantically around the alien artifact. They had moved it to a specialized chamber filled with equipment. We've made progress, Richards said. By using your friend Cell's data, we've established a basic interface with the artifact. It's not a full communication, more like reading its programming. Walker looked at the ancient machine, now humming with energy. What have you learned? The prohibition doesn't exactly prevent warfare. It prevents damage to space-time. Richards brought up a complex display. When weapons reach a certain destructive potential and are fired in space, they create ripples in reality itself. The prohibition detects these signatures and neutralizes them. So how do we fight back without triggering it? Richards smiled tiredly. We've been working on quantum energy collectors, devices that draw power from the quantum field rather than creating explosive force. They're harmless to space-time, but if reconfigured properly, they could be weapons the prohibition doesn't recognize. Walker finished. Exactly. We've modified 3 prototype devices and installed them on your shuttle. She handed him a datapad. It's not much, but it might be enough to test our theory. A technician approached them. Dr. Richards, you need to see this. We're picking up Aldari transmissions. They're establishing their first control zone in northern Canada. Walker nodded decisively. Then we need to move now. How soon can we launch? The shuttle's ready, Richards said. But Captain, this is a tremendous risk. If we're wrong, we're no worse off than we are now, Walker said. He looked around at the small team. I need volunteers for a dangerous mission. We're going to test these weapons against an Aldari scout ship. To his surprise, every hand in the room went up. 6 hours later, Walker sat in the pilot's seat of the modified shuttle, which they had renamed Prometheus. Richards sat beside him as co-pilot, with 3 technicians manning the experimental weapons. They had slipped away from the lunar base under the cover of routine maintenance traffic. There, Richards pointed to their sensor display. Aldari scout ship, just as predicted. They're patrolling the outer edge of Earth orbit. Walker nodded, guiding the shuttle toward the alien vessel. Remember, we're not supposed to have weapons. They'll think we're harmless. As they approached, the Aldari ship sent a warning transmission. Earth vessel, you are in restricted space. Return to your designated flight path immediately. Walker opened a channel. Aldari vessel, this is maintenance shuttle performing routine operations. We're experiencing navigation problems and request assistance. The alien ship paused, then moved closer to investigate. Walker knew they would detect no weapons. At least none they would recognize. Now, he ordered when the Aldari ship was within range. Richards activated the first quantum device. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then a beam of concentrated energy shot from their shuttle, striking the Aldari vessel. The alien ship's shields flickered and died. It worked. One of the technicians shouted. The prohibition didn't stop it. Walker didn't celebrate yet. Second weapon. The next beam hit the Aldari ship's propulsion system, disabling it completely. The alien vessel began to drift. They're sending distress calls, Richards reported. But more importantly, look at this. She pointed to readings from their sensors. Energy fluctuations throughout the solar system. The Prohibition Network has noticed something. Walker felt a chill. Is it going to shut us down? I don't think so. It's more like, it's observing, analyzing. She looked up, her eyes wide. I think we just got the attention of whoever built this system. Walker nodded grimly. Let's head back to the moon and prepare the rest of our fleet. Earth just found its loophole. As they turned away from the disabled Aldari ship, none of them noticed the faint ripple in space behind them, a distortion that hadn't been there before. Walker paced the command deck of the Prometheus, watching as engineers installed the quantum weapons on a dozen more shuttles. After their successful test, Richards had worked non-stop to replicate the technology. The lunar base had become humanity's last hope, hidden from Aldari sensors by the natural radiation of the moon's surface. "Captain, we have a problem," Richards called from her workstation. The circles under her eyes had darkened over the past 2 days of constant work. Walker joined her at the console. "What is it?" The first 3 tests were successful, but the 4th just failed completely. She pointed to data streaming across her screen. "The Prohibition system is adapting. It's learning to recognize our weapons." Walker frowned. "How is that possible? I thought it only detected damage to space-time." "That's what we believed, but it's more sophisticated than we realized." Richards pulled up a comparison of their weapon signatures. "Look here. Each time we fire, the energy pattern changes slightly, becoming more efficient. The Prohibition is detecting this evolution. So we have a limited window before it shuts us down completely." Richards nodded grimly. "Maybe 3 or 4 more shots per weapon configuration before it identifies the pattern." Walker stared at the data, his mind racing. After a moment, he looked up. "What if that's not a problem, but an opportunity?" "What do you mean?" Cell said the Prohibition was created by beings far more advanced than any known species. What if it's not just a simple defense system, but something more intelligent? Walker pointed to the changing energy patterns. "It's not just blocking our weapons, it's studying them, learning." Richard's eyes widened as she followed his thinking. "You think we can communicate with it? Not with words, but with actions." Walker turned to the tactical display, showing Aldari ships positioning around Earth. "We need to show it something it's never seen before." For the next 12 hours, Richards and her team worked on a radical new approach. Instead of trying to hide their weapons from the Prohibition, they deliberately designed them to interact with it. Each shot would carry a specific energy signature, creating a pattern when fired in sequence. "It's ready," Richards announced finally, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "But I can't guarantee what will happen. We're essentially trying to speak to a system that's millions of years old using physics as a language." "It's our best shot," Walker said, strapping himself into the pilot's seat of the Prometheus. This time, they were heading directly toward the main Aldari fleet in Earth orbit. No more scout ship tests. As they approached, alarms blared across their sensors. The Aldari had spotted them. "Earth vessel, you are violating the terms of surrender," came Commander Vex's angry transmission. "Return to your designated area immediately." Walker ignored the command, bringing the Prometheus directly into the middle of the Aldari formation. "All weapons, fire in sequence." Exactly as we planned. The modified quantum weapons activated one after another, targeting different Aldari ships. Not to destroy them, but to disable key systems. Each beam carried a unique energy signature, pulsing in a deliberate pattern. At first, nothing seemed to happen beyond the disabling of 3 Aldari vessels. Then, every ship in the area, both human and Aldari, experienced a momentary power fluctuation. "The Prohibition is responding," Richard shouted, pointing to her readings. "It's not shutting us down, it's acknowledging the pattern." Walker watched in amazement as energy readings spiked throughout the solar system. The Prohibition network was fully active, but not in the way they expected. Instead of blocking their weapons, it seemed to be resonating with them. "Look," one of the crew members pointed out the viewport. Around them, space itself appeared to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The effect spread outward from the Prometheus in concentric circles. "What's happening?" Walker asked, his voice hushed. Richard stared at her instruments in awe. "The Prohibition isn't just technology. It's woven into space-time itself. And I think—" She paused, hardly believing her own words. "I think we just woke it up." The Aldari ships began to retreat, their own sensors clearly detecting the strange phenomenon. Commander Vex's face appeared on their screen again, this time with undisguised fear in his eyes. "What have you done?" he demanded. "Do you realize what you've called?" Before Walker could respond, a new energy pattern appeared on their sensors, something vast and complex moving toward Earth from the outer solar system. The energy pattern grew stronger, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Walker and his crew watched as a shimmering distortion appeared before them, neither solid nor entirely insubstantial. It hung in space between the Prometheus and the retreating Aldari fleet. "What is that?" Walker whispered. Richards shook her head, her instruments registering readings she'd never seen before. "I don't think it's a what. I think it's a who." The distortion expanded, forming a swirling vortex of light and energy. Within it, shapes moved, shifting, flowing entities that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. The Aldari ships accelerated away, clearly terrified of what was happening. "Receiving transmission," the communications officer announced, sounding shocked. "But it's not coming through our systems. It's directly in our minds." Walker felt it too, not words exactly, but concepts and images flooding his consciousness. Understanding followed, as if knowledge was being downloaded directly into his brain. "The prohibition," he said slowly, piecing it together. "It's not technology at all. It's them." "Who?" Richards asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. "The creators," Walker said. "They didn't build a system to prevent war in space. They became the system. Their consciousness spread throughout space-time itself." More images flowed into their minds, a terrible war between two ancient species, weapons that tore holes in reality, entire solar systems collapsing as space-time shredded. Then came the solution. The surviving beings had transformed themselves into guardians of reality itself, becoming one with the fabric of space. "They're showing us their history," Richards whispered. The mental communication shifted, focusing now on humanity. Walker saw images of Earth's development, its wars, its struggles, but also its art, music, and compassion. The beings had been watching, analyzing, trying to understand this species that approached conflict so differently from others. Then came images of the Aldari and other species, all following predictable patterns of expansion and conquest until they encountered the prohibition, then adapting to more peaceful methods. But humans had done something unprecedented. "They're curious about us," Walker realized, "about how we found a way to work within their parameters instead of just accepting the limitations." A new presence entered their consciousness, colder, more formal. Walker recognized the mental signature of the Galactic Council before they even identified themselves. 3 ships had appeared at the edge of the solar system, larger and more advanced than even the Aldari vessels. "Humans of Earth," came a stern telepathic message. "You have violated the natural order. No species has ever found a way to circumvent the prohibition." Walker felt the Council's fear and outrage. They had built their entire civilization around the assumption that space warfare was impossible. Humanity's innovation threatened that foundation. "We did not circumvent it," Walker thought back. "We communicated with it. There's a difference." The ancient presence, the embodied prohibition, seemed to agree. It shared more images, countless civilizations developing faster than light travel, encountering the prohibition, accepting it as an immutable law of physics. None had ever thought to study it, to understand its purpose rather than just its effects. "The prohibition was never meant to prevent conflict," Richards said aloud, understanding flowing through her. "It was meant to encourage evolution beyond blind destruction." The Council representatives were clearly disturbed. "This cannot be allowed. If other species learn from humans." They were interrupted by the ancient presence, which projected an unmistakable sentiment, curiosity and approval of humanity's approach. Walker stood straighter, addressing both the ancient beings and the Council. "We didn't try to beat your system. We tried to understand it. And in doing so, we found that it's not about preventing warfare. It's about preventing the destruction of space itself." The Council ships moved closer. "The Aldari violated our directives by attacking your world. This we acknowledge. but your response changes everything. No species has ever communicated directly with the Guardians before. Walker felt a decision forming among the ancient presences. They had not interfered directly in galactic affairs for millions of years, content to simply maintain the prohibition. But humanity's actions had intrigued them. "They want us to explain," Richard said suddenly, understanding the images flooding her mind. "They want us to teach others what we've learned." The implications were enormous. Humanity, the newcomers to galactic society, had discovered something that the oldest civilizations had missed. They had seen beyond the rule to its purpose. 1 month later, Walker stood at the viewport of Earth's new diplomatic vessel, the Harmony. Unlike the military ships they had built before, this one was designed to show their understanding of the cosmic balance. Its quantum systems worked with space-time rather than against it, creating harmonious ripples that the ancient Guardians seemed to appreciate. The Aldari had withdrawn their forces entirely from Earth after the Guardians' appearance. The Galactic Council, after much debate, had extended formal recognition to humanity, not as a protected species, but as equals with unique insights. "It still doesn't seem real," Davis said, joining Walker at the viewport. She had been promoted to captain of her own vessel, but had requested to join this diplomatic mission. "Which part?" Walker asked with a small smile. "That we survived an alien invasion, or that we're now teaching older civilizations about cosmic physics." "All of it." She gestured to the stars beyond the glass. "A few months ago, we thought we were alone in the universe." Walker nodded, watching as their destination came into view. The massive council station, where representatives from 50 spacefaring civilizations had gathered to hear humanity's findings. Zell's ship accompanied them as an honor guard, a gesture of friendship from the Mithran people. Richards joined them, carrying data tablets with her final report. "The council scientists are still struggling to accept our conclusions. They've built their understanding of physics around working within the prohibition's limitations, never questioning why those limitations exist. And we stumbled onto the truth by accident," Walker mused. "Not by accident," Richards corrected. "By necessity. We had no choice but to look deeper, to find another way. That's what the Guardians find so interesting about humans, our adaptability under pressure." The ship docked smoothly at the station. Walker took a deep breath before leading his team toward the airlock. Beyond it waited the largest gathering of alien species ever assembled in one place. "Remember," he told his people, "we're not here to boast or claim superiority. We're here to share what we've learned, that the universe isn't built on rules, but on balance." The council chamber fell silent as the humans entered. Hundreds of alien representatives watched from tiered seating that surrounded a central speaking platform. The Aldari delegation sat stiffly in their section, Commander Vex noticeably absent. Walker approached the platform, feeling the weight of humanity's future in his steps. Above them all, a subtle shimmer in the air indicated that the Guardians were present, watching this historic moment. "Representatives of the galaxy," Walker began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "A few months ago, Earth had no knowledge of your existence. We were attacked, and when we tried to defend ourselves, we discovered the prohibition that prevents warfare in space." Murmurs spread through the chamber. "But we did not come here today to discuss war. We came to talk about understanding." Walker gestured to Richards, who activated a holographic display showing their findings. "What you call the prohibition is not a limitation to be accepted or circumvented. It is a conversation that has been ongoing for millions of years, a conversation many of you stopped participating in." The display showed the energy patterns they had discovered, how space itself responded to different approaches, how it reacted not to weapons themselves but to intent and effect. The Guardians did not create rules to control us. They transformed themselves to preserve reality itself. And they have been waiting for species that would recognize them not as barriers, but as teachers. As he spoke, the shimmer above intensified. Many of the alien representatives looked up in awe, some in fear. Few had ever witnessed the Guardians manifesting so directly. Humanity will not wage war in space, Walker continued. Not because we cannot, but because we understand why we should not. The cosmos itself is alive and aware in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Our strength isn't in finding loopholes in cosmic law. It's in recognizing that we are part of something greater and adapting ourselves to work in harmony with it. The Guardian's presence seemed to pulse with approval. A council elder rose from her seat. For 10,000 years, we have built our civilization around the belief that the prohibition was simply a law of physics. If what humans have discovered is true, we must reconsider everything. Walker nodded. That's why we're here, not as conquerors or warriors, but as students who happen to ask questions others had stopped asking long ago. As the council chamber erupted in discussion, Walker looked out at the stars. Humanity had found its place in the cosmos, not through dominance, but through understanding. The forbidden battlefield would remain forbidden, but for reasons they now embraced rather than resented. The Guardians had been waiting for a species that would see beyond the rules to their purpose. In humanity, they had finally found it.